Hi, guys. Today we're going to be talking about popular culture in the 1920s, specifically in how it changed women's roles and how women were perceived, and the different things that they did to embrace this new freedom that they had. So, women were treated very differently before the start of what they call the Roaring Twenties. And this is just a different term that they use for the 1920s era. They originally did not have many rights and were very overlooked within society. This means that women just kind of were seen as property when it came to like being with their husbands and things like that. So they just were not super important in day-to-day society to most people. And the 1920s changed the way women would be looked at forever because it gave them new freedoms, different rights, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we continue going. So, women in the 1920s, initially, they were more in some sort of traditional roles. So, these traditional roles include being caretakers of their home, which means like cooking, cleaning, things like that, raising their children, as well as teaching them. So, they were also seen as teachers. They also were used to being submissive under their husband. So, whatever they said went, and women just kind of had to listen to them always. And they truly did not really have any rights. They could not vote previously or before the 1920s. And this was just like the start. Well, the 1920s was the start to them becoming more of like what they called a new women. So, like the new women era time movement is that like women would look at magazines and they would be more interested in fashion. Some people decided to get into fashion, which we'll talk about a little bit about next, and just being more of their own person, embracing their new freedoms that they were given. So, as we talked a little bit about how women would get into fashion, they became more free and they would embrace themselves as flappers. So, flappers were women that typically dressed in non traditional clothing. So, these dresses were pretty short compared to what they would wear previously. They usually had some sort of fringe at the bottom to catch attention. They were just very like colorful and things like that. And most women wore feathered feathered headbands around their head, just to like be out there and embrace their new freedom. A lot of these women also bobbed their hair, which was not pretty normal. Most women used to have long hair back in the day. And many people looked down on them and they did not approve of the scandalous way that they were dressing. Another big thing that happened in the 1920s was the 19th Amendment came into effect. So this amendment was passed by Congress on June 4th, 1919, and finally ratified on August 18th, 1920. So this amendment gave women the right to vote, something that they had not been able to do before. This was something that they fought for a very long time. Even if you guys remember in 1848, the Seneca Falls Convention was a big staple in how women were finally able to vote. And it just took a long time. There was a lot of people that advocated for it, so it was awesome. And women in the 1920s, a lot of things changed in their lives, and it's super exciting to see how women have evolved even now and how the 1920s were a very pivotal time for women.